To find the meaning of life, most people go in a religious direction. But does God require a religion? What is religion?
I have thought about this for years and I have never said it. First, because I don't want to antagonize my friends.
Why is this subject antagonizing?
Because religion is part of culture and part of people's identity, and sometimes much more, their nationality, their reasons for doing and behaving the way they do. And they don't often take kindly to hearing things that in some sense challenge that. Now, I think of myself, it may surprise people, I think of myself as a religious person. I think that people, and scientists in particular, know very, very little about the universe, about the nature of existence that we're talking about right now. And so I feel humble in the vastness of the whole thing. But at the same time, it's exciting because we can contemplate it.
Can you define the word religion?
It means to bind the generations together.
When I talk about with the students, I like to go back to its origins in Latin, which comes from ligare, to tie, and re, which means back. And so how it's sort of how we tie ourselves to reality, you know, how we, and religion sort of tries to express what those ties are. How are we connected to the way things really are?
Religion, and this is my definition, and it's original material. Gary Kleiner says that religion is crowd control.
Religion shares the same root as the word ligament, connection. So religion is a reconnection. And it's people's word to describe that sort of connection that they are striving for with ultimate reality or with others.
It basically becomes a connecting medium to connect everybody together.
In a community and share the human experience together and to attempt to impose order on a fairly chaotic system that we're a part of.
It is a way of understanding the world around you and a way of people to come together.
And when people start to corral around a particular idea, start to share, start to love each other, offer each other, help each other, then God comes into the place where people help each other.
The main thing, the religion should be something that is to benefit other living beings.
You know, a truly religious person knows the whole world belongs to God, and so all the people in the world. So he loves everybody in the world, irrespective of what faiths and what languages they speak or what their routines are or the way of life they lead. He simply loves everybody.
人の救いをね、求める以上、宗教であってしかるべきです。
Religion is the way to purify yourself.
And religion is individual. So individually, whatever you can do that, it's your wish. See, your practice.
It's your complete philosophy of life. So it's your worldview, it's what you believe the nature of existence is, and what you ought to do in conducting your life.
The way you live your life is what you believe in. That should either scare the out of you or make you go, yeah, right on.
Religion is the way you live your life every day, not just one day out of 7.
My test of people's religion is this. I push until they get angry. And then I found their religion. I found a thing that they think is so true that it makes them angry if other people don't accept it.
宗教の定義とは、目に見えない感謝に対して、目に見えない物事に対しても感謝をできる。そういうことだと思います。そういう気持ちを教えることだと思います。
宗教的前提是什么？就是给人以安慰，给人以解脱。所以这个时候他就不管它是不是真实的存在。
Freud would say that these are fantasies and stories that we tell ourselves that are built from our earliest experiences as individuals and as a culture.
They all seem to me more like metaphors, metaphors that will help you get through life, understand that some aspects of life are more important than others, and come to terms with it.
And the thing with religion anyway, it only exists as long as we assume ourselves to be separate, cut off from the source of life around us.
Now, religion by definition actually means, according to Oxford Dictionary, a belief in a personal God or gods that deserve worship and obedience. So for a religion to exist, there has to be God.
The word religion, I think, is how people go about serving their chosen deity, whether that be if they believe in God, or if they choose to serve Satan, or if they choose to serve whatever else they could imagine.
I would define religion as a set of beliefs to get you through existence, to give it meaning, to give it some kind of structure, sometimes to give solace, sometimes to give inspiration, and sometimes to give insulation.
It can provide a framework for dealing with birth and death and a lot of human existence.
It's a quick explanation for how the universe works. And I think you can derive all kinds of other things from that, like how religion gives comfort, how religion gives morality. I think all of those things come from a way to explain the universe through emotional, non-rational means.
All religion is merely words. Words that have attached to them all kinds of emotion, because it's emotion that we're dealing with. We're not dealing with facts.
I don't like the word religion. Religion can be anything you choose. You can have a religion around a tree.
I'm not a lot on being religious, because, you know, I can religiously beat my wife. I don't, but you could religiously do things like that. I'm not so big on the term religion as I am on relationship with God.
Islam is really not a religion. The Holy Quran said, I give man Islam as a religion. Islam is really a government, it's really a world. And Islam is the nature in which every creature was created. What does that mean? Islam means total submission to do the will of God.
Judaism doesn't see itself as a religion per se. Generally, a religion is understood as the religious activity that someone does within the context of their life, that they take certain time out from their everyday affairs to pay heed to a certain system of beliefs.
I'm not religious, I'm a Christian.
There's only one true religion, and that's Christianity.
Religion is made by human beings. The belief in God is not a religion for me. It's a belief. It's a feeling inside, like love, like hate.
Religion is not about beliefs. And that's where everyone, I think, gets it wrong. Religion is, first of all, about belonging. And unfortunately, belonging too easily has an us versus them consequence, which I think is one of the real problems in the world right now. But also, if you say that religion is belief, then you want to know, well, are these beliefs true or not?
所以儒家呢是一个对其他宗教开放的一个 teaching system.
But in China, there was no any religious war, no, never. And the Taoism, the Buddhism, and the Confucianism, they just live together, coexist, and that's quite unique, because you know, the Chinese people and even the Chinese religion is very tolerable to other religions.
If you understand the religion correctly, religion cannot do harm. But because of misunderstanding of the religion, there can be a lot of harm done. And today, one of the maximum harm done in the world, whether it be India, whether it be Western countries, it is in the name of religion.
Religion is fearing God, obeying Him, and keep His commandments.
It's a doctrinal basis. We have certain truths that we adhere to as revealed to us by God that we try to understand and to exercise or to live out.
If you're talking about organized religion, it's politics. That's all. You're giving power to somebody who's interpreting their concept of a deity and of the way life should be lived.
They say all the time, God's everywhere. Why do you have to go to a building and give them your money? I mean, is that what it's really about? Is that, I mean, you know, is that something that Jesus and God started way back when? Like, give us your dough.
As for sitting in a church with a bunch of folks, I don't have much use for it.
You need to understand, religion
is spirituality that has to some degree been ritualized.
Organized system of values and beliefs and
an outward form of service of an inward grace that is on the inside of you.
Judaism governs everything we do. It governs everything we eat, everything we wear. It governs 24 hours a day of our activity. So it's not that sometimes I'm involved in religious activity and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm involved in ritual activity.
The most religious people on earth are the people with the least. It's not the rich billionaires who have the most to be grateful for. You'd think they'd be the ones in church every Sunday, but they never go to church. The religious people are all the poor. They get together every week and thank God. I just want to know, what are they thanking him for?
You'll come to a cult with your own confusions and uncertainties about life, and they will be replaced with certainties. They'll be replaced with the determinations of the leader about how the universe functions. And often, I mean, if you go and look at, say, the Westboro Baptists, and they're really the people who picket soldiers' funerals in the US, you see that there is no human consideration left, which I think is the dangerous aspect of the whole problem, that people become hateful towards other people because they have come to feel righteous, and that righteousness has become self-righteousness, and they're filled now with the loathings that the cult leader gives them.
It makes perfect sense that people would need, as a whole, most of us would have a very powerful need to believe that we're part of a higher purpose, that we're part of something larger than we are individually. Atheists have it too, so that if they deny God, then they have to become part of a larger force toward eliminating the evil influence of religion in the world. That's their religion, it's their cause, they're now a community, they're now forcing on other people their beliefs.
The Russian state under the Marxist regime was totally religious. I mean, they had parades and rituals and ceremonies, and they had dogmas they had to believe in, and they had idealistic, ridiculous visions of the utopian future, and I mean, it was so very much like any other religion that you run into today, and just as crazy and irrational.
There are various philosophies that we might not think of as religious, like humanism, atheism even, or the homosexual agenda. These are all aspects of religion, but they're non-theistic religions.
There's no way you're going to come to an agreement on what that word means. Religion, as I understand it, is a fiction. It's a made-up category that really doesn't correspond with any particular kind of essence or reality.
The writers of the Old Testament don't even understand how that the moon shines by reflected light. They are clueless as to natural reality.
I think people use religion to shift responsibility.
I mean, it's very important to say that this is not just a matter of religion. This is about business policies.
It's just like any other corporation, you know, Halliburton, Conoco, whatever, I don't know. I'm leaving.
Honesty in business is part of my obligation and connects me to God as much as silent prayer, right? Treating my neighbor properly is, can you excuse me?
If you look at, say, the way that the leaders of Enron did what they were doing, they did it with a tremendous conviction of rightness. You know, they were stealing billions of dollars from grandmas and pension funds, but they were doing it for the good of the capitalist ethos. And I think it's important to understand that it's the drive towards belief that's what is essential in human beings, that fanaticism can be political, it can be commercial, it can be among psychologists. You have the Sullivanians, who are a psychotherapy cult. I personally view Freudian analysis as largely cultic, you know, because it doesn't have a basis in rational science. It's not demonstrably so. And so what will happen is that whether it's Freud or Rajneesh or whoever it is, the person's individuality is subsumed like a child to a parent, you know, in the way that a 6-year-old hero worships the parent, the father often. There'll be the same sort of view of this idealized, perfected person. And then when you look at the cult leaders, they're often as not sickly, self-obsessed, angry individuals.
The thing that I know was taken from us, I know we were brought here in the holds of a ship by Caucasian people. When we got here, our names were stripped from us, our religion was stripped from us, our mother was even stripped from us. When black babies were born, they would sell them off to plantations. So therefore, for me, Minister Farrakhan said, don't worry about religion, study your history, and you'll walk back into your religion.
Why do humans develop religion?
I think there was a very, very strong evolutionary advantage to certain kinds of irrational thinking.
It's certainly a helpful institution for war making.
Seems like it's human nature to need a god.
Well, let's start with biology. The human brain obviously evolved without any intelligent design. It's ad hoc. The human brain is sort of built sort of ad hoc with things added on over time. And the part of our brain that reasons, that actually can stop and question the lower parts of the brain, the emotional parts of the brain, and reanalyze things, that part of the brain is sort of added on later, and it's kind of new, relatively, in the history of evolution.
I mean, you might have thought, and as a young man I thought, certainly Darwinian evolution must have made us rational, extremely rational, because to not be rational gets you killed. To make foolish decisions or irrational, to follow irrational leaders must get you killed. And if you get killed, you're not going to propagate. So it must have been that we were created by an evolution which made us extremely rational. But as I got older, I realized that is not true. When you're in a fight for survival, the one who wins is the one who has the most faith in his own invulnerability. Why his own invulnerability? Because his God will protect him. And so the belief in irrational, supernatural things can make you an extremely formidable enemy.
This is the biological origin of why people will adopt bad ideologies, because the inoculation to that would be a good education in reason and thinking and philosophical reasoning and so forth, and understanding of science and discipline, the acquisition of mental discipline. All of that requires a lot of effort on the individual's part, and also requires a lot of resources on the social side of things. The civilization, the society has to provide a lot of resources to get a broad swath, hopefully the whole society, going through this process of becoming intellectually and emotionally mature. Without that, we're kind of stuck with the biology, and the biology is very crude and leads us to adopt these really stupid ideologies, and you have people doing crazy, ridiculous things and starting wars for reasons that really don't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, the Middle Eastern conflict, for example, is just plain stupidity. If any spark of reason would occur, they could reconcile and come to some agreement, and they wouldn't be in this cycle of violence, but they're stuck in it.
For example, I'll give you, when a baby cries, he doesn't cry milk, milk, he just cries. But the mother knows the baby is crying for milk. Now, same way, we know God loves us. My father, my parents loves me. But we cannot understand that love, but he is source of the love. You have to take that love from him. Without him, there is no love.
That question reminds me of a story in seminary once when the professor stood to say, class, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you way back. And the class said, gone back. He said, I'm going to take you back to when the biblical times. The class said, gone back. I'm going to take you back to before Moses. The class says, gone back. He said, I'm going to take you all the way back to the Garden of Eden. The class said, gone back. He said, I'm going to take you back before Adam and Eve were on earth. The class said, gone back. He said, I'm going to take you back before there was God. And they said, now you done gone too far. So my answer would be, you gone too far.
About 50,000 years before the present, we begin to see incredible things that appear to us today to be the evidence of early religion. We see burials, we see children in graves buried with non-utilitarian or non-practical items. And these are spread throughout the caves and shelters of Europe. And in fact, one of the ideas then is that, well, there must have been a point in evolution where there was a benefit for people to see that there was an afterlife.
Religion was created largely because you needed a means of getting the people who do the dirty work in society to keep on doing the dirty work. And they're not going to do the dirty work forever if they feel that they're being cheated. So you give them this huge reward in the afterlife that they will get if they continue doing the dirty work as they're supposed to. And the people at the top kind of get to enjoy all of the worldly pleasures right now.
Of course, superstition and religion, a large part of them,
is the desire to control that which we feel we have no control over. Our destinies, the fact that we're going to die. Religion gives us answers where there really aren't answers.
Many of these religions, in fact, are really just conglomerates. I mean, Hinduism for its first 2,000 years wasn't a religion. I mean, Hinduism was just this collection of rather interesting local practices and rituals and so on.
Evolution applies to religion. You know, certainly if you look at what a Christian now believes, or you look at, say, what St. Francis believed in the world he lived in under Pope Innocent III, and then you move back to the first Christians in Rome, these people wouldn't even be able to talk to each other. The modern Christian has no idea what medieval Christianity was.
A lot of Druidry lives on, like we'll say, this hasn't happened so far, touch wood. Well, that goes back to the reverence of the trees from the ancient Druid traditions.
And what about the Christmas tree itself? Wasn't that?
Well, the Christmas tree itself is a fairly modern tradition, and it's coming from Europe.
Saul of Tarsus took over a religious movement of Jews that weren't trying to break out of Judaism. And as somebody who wished he was a Jew and wanted to take elements of Judaism that lured him in, he created a new religion that was ultimately anti-Semitic, anti-female.
It's easy to become social Mormons without even realizing that it's not so much you're a believer as that that's just the way everybody behaves. And so it's good business to be a Mormon. And that's where you find a lot of Mormons doing this. You know, it's one of the reasons we moved away from Utah. We want to live here in North Carolina where all the people doing wacko, crazy, evil things on the television news were Baptists.
What does fear have to do with religion?
Christianity brought fear with it when it came here. We had no concept of hell or being punished.
For it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. A fearful thing. Fear God.
There is a fear that's spoken of in the Bible. It's not fear of God, but it's a reverential awe.
One of the best translations for fear is healthy respect.
You don't fear anything. You only fear of Allah, because Allah is capable of creating every fear into good things.
The basis of all religion is the fear of death. And religion tackles that and says, don't be afraid to die, because you will come back in different forms, you will live again, you will see your loved ones, no one really dies. Even Buddhism is that, and Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy.
仏教徒にとって恐怖というものは乗り越えるものではなくて受け入れること。受け入れた上で乗り越えていく。
The best way to deal with fear is to take fear, reach out, bring it in, and rather than hold it out, make it your best friend. Turn fear into your ally. Whatever you fear is a doorway, an invitation for your own being to step forward into. And as we step forward into the very thing we fear, we'll actually find that behind our greatest fear is our greatest gift.
What religion does is it adds and or gives comfort to those who are afraid.
So the fear for death is love for life.
I think people are afraid of things that they don't know anything about.
I have met people who are neo-Nazis, and they have checked me for horns.
And I think that fear is an important part of what makes people who they are.
These yearnings for some sort of predictability are maybe biologically encoded within us because it's advantageous to think that way, right? Because then you maybe do something about it. But I think when you translate this into the way we feel about the universe, I think there's this fear, like people want some sense of certainty. You're like, well, you know, I don't like not knowing what's going on. I don't like not knowing what's going to happen when I die. Because in my life, sometimes bad things have happened, sometimes good things have happened. I want to know that they're going to be good, right? How many of us have told somebody when they've broken up with their significant other that it's all going to be okay? And you know what? Sometimes it's not going to be okay. We like being told the story that it's going to be okay.
You know, we are a country living with chronic fear.
Let us push back against fear and hopelessness by acting in ways that will change the world.
Does it make sense to you that a couple thousand years ago people just invented God because they were just afraid and needed a reason to exist?
Well, people have invented all sorts of false concepts of God. I don't deny that. And most people have some concept of God, but it's often a false concept of God that they have.
I think Jimmy Swaggart was, some of the good things that he did were driven by fear. Fear that God would disapprove of him, fear that he would let down his family and people that were looking up to him and expectations of him. Fear that he wouldn't outshine his cousin Jerry Lee Lewis, because there was a lot of competition between them. So fear is a great tool.
And if you're afraid and you do things only because you're fearing hell in the end, it's not a real free choice. You're not really worshiping God, you're worshiping your own fears.
I don't really think of it as being so much a fear as an internalization of the rules.
You know, it's so cut and dry. You know, thou shalt not kill. If you do this, you're going to hell. And they shove it at you. You're going to hell, and your kids are going to hell. Those bastard children you had because you weren't married. You can't do anything right. And fear just, I'm going to get married. Huh? They're not going to be bastard children. I'm going to do everything right. And I think fear makes people just live their life in such a way that it's not natural to even live your life that way.
Well, fear obviously in human relations is a great motivator. As children, we're motivated by fear of our parents to do right. You know, fear of that spanking is what keeps you from running out on the road when you're playing.
Guilt is our self-punishment, what we do to ourselves for not measuring up to the standard we have set. Guilt's a good thing. Guilt is the glue that holds civilization together, because the people that make civilizations work are people who are motivated by fear of guilt.
All you've got left is to fear destruction. Well, that might get you through. I know at times that I just wish my kids, I want my kids to fear me enough that they don't do something stupid. I'd rather obey me because they love me, but when they have a crisis of love, I would like that the fear of getting in trouble would keep them from stealing the car and going out at night.
The Garden of Eden is a maximum security prison where Adam and Eve, two people who never had a childhood. That's the defining experience of mammals, and human beings particularly. We are mammals. Our relationship to our mother is biologically fundamental. A human being who is motherless is a tragic figure, and yet Adam and Eve have no mother. All they have is a completely insane father whose first words to Adam when he awakens in the Garden of Eden is not, "Oh, my beautiful child, I'm so glad to see you. Welcome to this paradise. It's yours. I made it for you." No, it's a invisible, disembodied voice saying, "I'll kill you if you break my rules." And my first rule is you must never partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
And Jesus put it so clearly, says, why would you fear man who can only destroy a body? If you're going to fear, you ought to fear him who could destroy both body and soul.
And God can do that.
And make you know the misery of childbirth and the suffering, and you'll have to work for a living. So God is saying, if you would like to be a parasite here and be one of my hangers-on and adore me and live perpetually in your ignorance, then you can have anything you want.
Sometimes religion abuses fear. Sometimes they use fear in a way to try to coerce and manipulate people, and that kind of use of fear is wrong.
I'm scared of women. Women and the police. Two things I'm scared of.
What are the good things that religion does?
Religious behavior certainly can lead to increasing amounts of compassion, sympathy, love for people in this life.
Hospitals and orphanages and nurseries and care for the Bible talks about caring for the widows and the orphans. And
religions have provided people with inspiration, with vision.
Well, we've got a lot of great art, music, beautiful cathedrals, mosques.
It puts people close together. It creates communities. It creates families. It creates a purpose for people.
Helping the poor, housing homeless.
Religion is a good help to just keep order among mankind.
There are holidays. That's a lot of fun, most of them anyway, except for the like 2 25-hour fasts, which I could do without.
Can you talk about any of the good things that religion does?
I don't really know anything good. You'd like to believe there was good. Churches put on, you know, like bean suppers, yard sales. I mean, I think when you're a kid, the good part is you get to drink wine before you're old enough.
What most people get out of churches and religions is community. What they're getting is a community of other believers. The particular thing they believe in is not nearly as important as the fact that they meet every week, they care about each other, they bring each other soup when somebody gets sick, they commiserate when somebody dies. This is a group of people who validate your view of the world.
People who believe in God live longer. When they're sick, they're more likely to get well or to get well faster.
And we know, for example, religion's a good predictor of human happiness. The reason that is that it's social organization and community, not because it answers deep and perplexing questions that actually about 0.1% of the population really care much about.
Religion gives people comfort because it allows people to be in denial, and that's not always a bad thing. I wouldn't want to have gone through the Holocaust or through the massacres of Muslims in Bosnia and been in touch with reality. Those people definitely needed to be outside of what they were experiencing.
Can religion do harm?
As a religion, no. But people using religion as a tool can. I mean, it was Reverend Jim Jones who had everyone commit suicide, and it was what happened in Waco. But that wasn't the religion that was doing it, it was people using religion. And unfortunately, yes, there are evil people in the world who misuse tools given to them. But that's any field in the world.
The harm in religion often comes from a need for power.
If we take the term religion here in this question and say religion causing harm, I think the church leadership, which is man, can cause great harm. Look what they did in Jesus' time. The Pharisees, the leaders of the Jewish thing, they took the laws that were given in Leviticus and they expanded them to several hundred so that you had to know which kind of spoon you were using, how many steps you took that day, and they made it, that was man's burden on man. And it did great harm, probably, because it took man away from his relationship with God and made his relationship with the leaders of the church.
Admittedly, the church has done some wrong things, the Inquisition, the Crusades, and so on, but that doesn't mean God endorsed it.
When religion is used in a bad way, it reflects on all religions, even if it's not the religion of the person who used it.
A lot of times people who are extreme in one aspect of their life, when they apply that to the religion, it maintains that same extremity. One way of looking at that is as a sort of personality trait. There are different ways of looking at personality, one of which is the idea that people vary in terms of how intense they are.
Religious people are dangerous people. People are quick to say, I will uphold, or I will fight for my religion or for my religious belief or my religious faith. But it doesn't make it right. What you believe, because you are willing to stand up for it, doesn't make it right. Does it?
The person who gives their full life to athletics, when they're no longer fit, they'll give their whole life to something else.
The second you become this passive and let it be something that's so far above man that you can't argue with it, it's what created the world. It is the absolute right, it is the absolute truth. You can do so much evil.
All sorts of terrible things have happened in the name of religion throughout history. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. I live in an area of the world where a particular religion is dominant. At this point in history, whether or not that's always been the case, I really don't know because I'm not a student of religions. But at this point in time, that religion is excessively violent. And that violence affects my life and the life of my children every minute, because we have to be on the lookout for someone who's willing to give up their life to take ours at any moment, which is absolutely bizarre.
I think the natural human reflex is to cut the heads off people who disagree with you. Certainly, we Catholics have cut the heads off a fair number of people over the years.
I have no compunction whatsoever defining that as evil. I don't think that in any way, shape, or form is a function of not being open-minded. There's an old saying that some people are so open-minded their brains have fallen out.
You know, we talk about the Bible as really a library, not just simply a single book, because it's by many different authors, written over a length of time, and with a lot of back and forth, and you know, a position is presented, and then another position is presented, and there's kind of a give and take among the authors.
The Bible only is as strong as it is because so many people revised and revised and revised the writing.
The Bible came from men over a period of years, beginning with Moses, who was inspired by the Holy Spirit to sit down and write it, leaving us a record, God's record.
To me, it's the book of truth, you know. It is a human work. Human beings have written these books of the Bible, but I would say under the influence of the Spirit of God.
Who wrote the Bible?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
I don't know. I wasn't there.
There's
But,
no author's signature. The only author's signature is in like the last 8 verses where it says that Moses finished writing it and died. And then there are another 4 verses where supposedly he wrote and cried, or he told Joshua to write them and Joshua ben Nun wrote them. All kinds of mythical answers. And I don't know. I mean, I can tell you Charles Dickens wrote some books. I can tell you Shakespeare, supposedly Shakespeare, wrote a pile of plays. The author didn't sign it. My answer is who wrote it? Anonymous.
The 4 books of the Gospels were written by different people from different backgrounds to influence different people of different backgrounds. One was a Jew who had become a Christian who was trying to influence Jews. One was a Jew trying to influence pagans. One was a pagan trying to influence pagan. One pagan trying to influence Jews, which is why the 4 books are as different as they are.
An individual has a good idea, exports that idea possibly with a story which is meant to be metaphorical, like the Garden of Eden. If you trace that story, you find that there are Babylonian ring seals that go back about 1,500 years before the Hebrew Bible could possibly have been written down. And they show the Garden of Eden. But they don't show God in the Garden of Eden, they show the goddess in the Garden of Eden. They don't show an apple tree, they show a date palm. And they don't show humanity being expelled from the garden, but being welcomed in. And it's the snake that's doing the welcoming. So what happens is that symbols, you know, the Babylonians are a Semitic people also. The Bible itself says that Abraham came from Ur, so he would have brought with him the religion of Babylon. Certain changes then occur. You know, the 70 deities of the Babylonians are reduced to one, Yahweh, the war god. His mother, Asherah, is written out of the book completely. Most Christians and Jews don't even know that there's a mother goddess with a name who is meant to be the mother of Yahweh. Because that's the other thing that happens with holy books. You have to get rid of anything that disagrees with the new truth.
The sacred texts were written by old men with beards and ambitions who wanted to control their society, came up with a fairy tale and proclaimed to the people that that was absolute truth. Anyone who didn't follow that truth was an enemy of the state, and anyone who did was a good citizen.
So what happens is you get somebody who rigidifies and codifies the books and says, this is now law. This is the way it is. You can't change this in any way.
Our most holy book is called the Kitabi Akdas, and that's a book of laws. That tells us how to treat one another. That tells us what we should do and should not do, very simply.
You should take it for what it is. It's a book written by humans who lived a very long time ago before we knew how electricity worked.
The word electron, as far as I know, occurs in no religious text. The words quark, the words Big Bang. In fact, the ideas, vaguely perhaps, are there. But the actual nuts and bolts of existence, I don't know of a religious tract which contains these.
The Bible was written a long time ago by people who knew very little about the universe. They didn't know quantum mechanics. They didn't know the most basic things about physical reality that took a long time and a lot of struggle and a lot of experimentation to figure out.
We're listening to something that was written thousands of years ago. We don't pay attention to anything else those people talked about or said, because everything else was kind of they weren't very advanced as far as science is concerned and their other beliefs. But this one thing, religion, they knew what they were talking about.
It was written by, I used to tell my mom this, it was written by men who would have hated her. They had no thoughts of her in mind. And it's funny, the people that go around, you know, quoting from it have no understanding from it. And they're like, they memorize somebody's like Shadrach begat Josaphat begat horseradish, whatever. It's like memorizing all these names is gonna help anyone. Like what good will that do? I mean, that's when oral history had to tell you your family lineage for one thing. And these stories are supposed to serve as metaphors as a way to live your life. But right now, we have a legal system in place, we have laws, things have superseded this. So why, when someone has reinvented, or when reinvented is the operative word of what people do with the Bible, but when someone has built the fastest car on earth, do you really want to keep toting around that horse buggy?
We have to cultivate a capacity of discernment, recognizing what type of consciousness would someone 2,000 years ago have. Not as evolved as today.
Now, we're standing in front of Stonehenge. Anyone who examines the mathematical structure of Stonehenge will find that there is a coded number system which talks about the construction of a way that the solar system is constructed. That's as scientifically accurate as it is religiously true.
It's energy that they were a conduit for. It's energy coded into words, just like energy is coded into a battery. And when you and I read those words, we're decoding the energy and getting it and consuming it.
Our spirituality, a lot of it is passed down orally. A lot of it we have to go and get ourselves. We have to go out into nature and sit there and absorb that teaching.
There's no actual written tradition within Druidry. It's an oral tradition, so it's passed on from one Druid to another. So from that point of view, we have no holy scripture. But that does not mean that we do not revere some of the other religions' holy works. If it's holy, it's holy.
So all these utterances of Mehera, they have been recorded after 1,000 years of Mehera. It was just transforming from mouth to ear, so it was being given. After that, people started forgetting it. So it was written.
This book is Confucius' masterpiece. It's called Intellect of Confucius. It's also called Confucius' Bible, a collection of sayings of Confucius.
Did he write them down, or did
No,
others remember
his disciple,
them?
He said it, and his disciple collected and made it into a book.
Have you read all the books behind you?
I don't know without turning around. I've looked at all. I put them all on the shelf. I've read a lot of those books.
And you've written some of those books?
I have written a book. Yeah.
What's the difference between those books and the Holy Tablet books?
Well, they don't sell as well. And in fact, when you go into a motel and you open the drawer, do you find the extravagant universe in there? No, you find something else.
Krishnamurti was brought up to believe that he was the Messiah. He was told that he shouldn't read books at all. He was then inherited the Theosophical Society and gave all the money away and tried to say, don't follow me, leave me alone. And he spent a lifetime doing that, developing a following. His main teaching appears to have been, work it out for yourself. Don't elect me as the fount of knowledge. Have a direct experience of the world.
The Holy Bible, is it literal? Is it figurative? Is it mythology? Which parts are true, which aren't? How do we determine which is which?
It's a mixture of all those things. Basically, there is mythology, there is history and geography that are for real, of course, because they all took place in a certain time in human history, in a certain human culture, in a certain place geographically speaking, and so on. But of course there is mythology in it. Of course there are all sorts of human elements that are brought in to help God to communicate with people using ordinary human situations and circumstances and cultures within the context of his revelation of himself down through the ages.
A couple hundred years of different translations, and you think you know the exact message?
The Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew, the New Testament in Greek. That's right.
And have you read it in the original Hebrew and the original Greek?
I have read various different translations that will give every subtly a meaning that you can possibly imagine.
Genesis 1:1 in Hebrew. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In English, generally translated, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now you look at the word God, it's plural. However, created is used in a singular, suggesting that perhaps there was an earlier tradition. In other words, the text, Genesis 1, can read just as well with the word God being replaced by the word gods. The word Elohim is plural, and it's actually used, historically, perhaps it was used as a council of gods, a group of gods.
Should this sacrifice be boiled or braised? Should it be, is it thou shalt not kill, or is it thou shalt not murder? Is it a young woman who will conceive, or is it a virgin? That there's a difference between the New Testament and the Old Testament on this regard. The Old Testament in Isaiah 7 says that this is a young woman. This doesn't say anything at all about her virginity. But when the Bible gets translated into Greek, they use the word parthenos. And parthenos is a word that can mean virgin, but doesn't always mean virgin. And Christians took that to be an aspect of the miraculous birth of Jesus. So once the passage was applied to Jesus, they said many Christians say that he had a virgin birth. But the text is very ambiguous on that, because not only is alma in Hebrew a young woman and not a virgin, but even the Greek word itself is ambiguous.
Most people who are not familiar with the original text of the Old Testament, most people who have learned the Bible primarily through their clergymen in English, through Christianity largely, would be shocked to even hear what I'm saying right now. Would be shocked there's even question, there's even doubt that the original text is anything but authentic and is anything but singularly interpreted.
So by definition, a religious scripture cannot change, but all the religious scripture that we have today, except for the Quran, has been changed.
I've read the Quran, and I tried to get it interpreted for me by mullahs in Iran. And no two mullahs interpret it the same way.
नहीं, रामायण सत्य है, भागवत सत्य है। सत्यता के लिए डरने की जरूरत नहीं है। आदमी मां डरता है कि यहाँ कोई गलत कार्य करता है। जो सत्य है, सत्य को कौन झुठला सकता है? ये भगवान के मुखारबिंद से निकले हुए वचन हैं।
There's no mistakes in the Bible. The mistakes is in man.
To understand if you are right or wrong has to begin with God's Word. Everything is based on God's Word.
If you were to ask me, I'll tell you it's literally true.
The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, I believe, word for word, came from the Word of God.
If God inspired man to write the Bible, we have to trust their word for it, that they were inspired.
The Bible is 66 books, written over a period of 1,500 years, and we find that they were in agreement.
That would also apply to the Muslims. They all agree, they're all in agreement, they were inspired by God.
You don't have 66 books in the Quran. It's one book, so you don't have that test of putting it to other authorities.
I don't believe God, being the immanent producer of the world and the creator of all, I don't believe he would have allowed a book to have come into existence that represents him and the lessons that were taught from him. I don't believe he would have allowed that to have become into print without it being accurate.
You weren't there. You didn't see him talk to those people. You didn't see what he did. All you're reading is that book. But how do you know that's true?
The Bible teaches subjective proof. That means that you can do certain things that while you can't prove it to anybody else, you can prove it to yourself, whether it's true.
Let's be intellectual. So that means I sit down and I learn the body of material itself and ask questions within the context of the body. What does it think about reality? Not what I think. What does it think? Not why it disagrees with me. And if it disagrees with me, therefore I have a question. No, that's not a good question. That's an answer. Meaning I had an answer. The Torah said something that disagreed with my answer, so all of a sudden I have a question. No. That's not a question. A good question is, what do these words say? Let's understand them themselves from within their understanding of reality. That's a good question. I have found that almost everybody who does that comes to the same conclusion. This is real.
The more I study in the books of the Bible, especially Torah, these are clearly, genuinely ancient documents. And whether there was editorial intervention at various stages, certainly there was. The stories are messy in the way that true records are.
The Bible is actually a collection of different documents, some of which are semi-historical, some of which are mythical, some of which are just lists of ethical precepts. Some are actual letters written by actual historical persons.
The various holy books, of course, they're not divine. They're all written down by humans. In some cases, the writing down process has historic interest.
The early chapters in Genesis are stories which were borrowed from other cultures, because we know that in Mesopotamia and other places, similar stories were being told about floods and about creation of man. So it worries me, doesn't worry me at all, that the tradition from which we come, which is essentially the Jewish scriptural tradition, tells these stories in a way that is not, as it were, scientific.
But when I read the book of Genesis, to me, there was no reason to believe it wasn't true. No, you couldn't find. Why would anybody write it? No, there was just no reason that someone would make it up.
If you read Genesis, and you don't have to read very carefully, and you have to be a literary critic, but it's so whimsical, it is so inconsistent. It's poetry, and I think it might be fine as poetry.
If you call into question the creation story in Genesis, then that, of course, calls into question everything else in the Bible. So that happens to be one of the cornerstones of preserving biblical literalism.
There are certain statements that are tough to reconcile, but nothing of substance.
There do appear to be some very minor contradictions in numbers and figures in the Bible, that sort of thing. And I think, but that can just be attributed to scribal errors as the Bible has been reproduced over the years.
In a modern day, I find it interesting that people already, even religious people, who claim to be biblical literalists are actually not. If they were, there will be, they'd be arrested. So people are already selective.
If your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, you should gouge it out, or whatever it says. I think the Bible's a little dark, and if we followed all its principles exactly, A, we'd be contradicting ourselves a lot, and B, we'd all be dead in a very short while.
And that's what a lot of people say, but everything's so conflicting in whatever religious book or whatever religious mantra. Of course it's conflicting because the holy prophets were the social workers of the day and would give different advice to the same question if it was posed by a different person, because that advice would be right for one person but not the next.
In the study of religion, we like to use the category myth. And so I would use myth to describe the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, the Quran. These are all sacred stories that really are not about whether they're true or false, but instead are about ways to orient oneself in the cosmos.
I don't think it's myth. I think in general the Bible tries to be as close as possible to an understanding of a religious truth.
Scriptures can still be respected as sources of insight, perhaps even truth in some larger sense, without being taken literally.
I look back at, for example, some of the passages in Judges about ethnic cleansing, and I cannot believe that this is actually something that God really wanted. And if you look in the New Testament, Jesus says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, etc. So there's clearly an unfolding and developing narrative as gradually people over the centuries begin to catch glimpses of what God is about and what God is like. And for Christians, that narrative comes to a climax in Christ and the life of Christ.
I'm not sure that the form in which those writings appeared originally is the form in which they appear today, because I think many things have been added to them, taken from them. It's been edited over and over and over again.
Many assume that what we call the Bible today existed exactly in that form, a couple thousands of years ago, and that formed a whole, and that was the organization, and so on, unaware of the struggle among I'm thinking particularly Christians, about which documents were authentic. And of course, there are a number of Gnostic Gospels, some of which have been discovered in recent time, that are not part of the canon.
I think it's best, as I read this book for the first time in my life, I think it's best interpreted as stories.
That are metaphoric to give us an idea or a framework upon how we should live today.
It's wonderful literature, but that's the end of the story. There's no fundamental truths in it.
The Old Testament seems to have come by word of mouth from some illiterate sheep herders.
Noah's Ark, he was 600 years old or so when he built that ark. 600 years old. He had to get 2 of every animal and insect. All right, I can believe he got 2 ox. I mean, that's not that hard to find. But how do you get 2 different fleas, male and female? And you got to find a male mosquito.
They're on the ox.
Pardon me?
They're on the ox.
There you go.
And I mean, some things were obviously a creative invention. For instance, like the account of the creation of the world in 6 days. I mean, that's not fact. The world wasn't created in 6 24-hour days and then God rested. That's an invention. But I suppose the truth behind it is, though, that God did create the world.
The world was created in 6 days. And that sounds kind of ridiculous now. So then they say, well, we don't know how long a day was. A day could have been 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years. Well, why didn't he say so? Why did he call them days? I mean, he used the term days. Now we try and make the Bible seem reasonable. But there's nothing in the Bible that talks about a day could be 1,000,000 years. It says 6 days. And we can't accept that anymore, so we change the meaning of the words.
Did Jonah really get swallowed by a whale and he hung out there with no oxygen for 3 days? And I mean, what? Okay, clearly this is a metaphor. Okay, we can accept that.
If Jonah was not swallowed by a fish, the truth in the book of Jonah, the story, the meaning of the book of Jonah theologically would not be affected one iota as far as I'm concerned. So the meaning of truth, whether something really happened or not, does not necessarily affect the truth or the value of that book.
Already in the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve being tempted by the serpent, and although that may not be literally, it shouldn't be taken literally, nevertheless it shows the kind of pattern that constantly recurs in human history of people being tempted and doing evil.
Well, maybe other parts are metaphorical too. Maybe the resurrection didn't actually happen. Maybe it's like a destruction, redemption, rebirth, starting over story. And we're all resurrected in that sense by, sort of absolving our sins and asking for forgiveness from the people we have sinned and starting over. Maybe that's what it really means.
There's no one left alive that was there when it was written that could say to you, oh, that story's full of shit. The guy didn't do any of that. He went around the lake. He didn't walk over. He didn't part the water or go through it. He went around. I saw him. He took a camel. He didn't even walk. He was lazy. No one knows. So people will dispute it, though. But because humankind, people, when they tell a story, or when they write a story, when they're writing a book, especially when they tell a story, or even when they tell a joke, people, storytellers, they add stuff and they make things better than they are and more exciting than they are. So like to me, anything that's written is kind of been embellished.
I believe that the Bible is full of genuine writings that are what they purport to be. I also believe that many of the things that are told really happened as described, that God really did speak to Abraham. Do I believe all of the story of Joseph? No, it's too constructed, it's too artful. Do I believe in the book of, which book is it? One of the, anyway, the story of when Elisha, a bald man, went through a village and was mocked by the little boys, and then later bears came into the village and killed the little boys. The story says that God sent the bears to punish those little boys. I don't believe God works that way. I think that's miserable. But maybe there really was an occasion where bears came in and mauled a little boy or several little boys, and previously they had mocked an old man who was bald, and so people ascribe a cause and effect relationship. So is the story true in that sense? Maybe. I have no way of knowing, but I certainly don't believe that God really works that way.
If your heart wants to disbelieve,
it will be attracted to the vague part, so you can prove someone else wrong by explaining it. If your heart wants to believe, you will see in the vague part how it is the same as something else. So those who seek unity find unity. Those who seek division find division.
The New Testament says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there. Many people wish to interpret the New Testament literally, but by their own standard, I would ask them to tell this pin to move from here to there. And if it moves, then I will give them free rein to interpret the Bible however they want to. If not, they really have no choice but to interpret it symbolically or spiritually. Otherwise, by their own mouth, which Jesus said, you'll be judged by your own words on the day of judgment. You'll be judged according to the words that come out of your mouth. By their own words, basically, they have declared that they have no faith if they can't make this pin move.
So it's more persuasive, I would say, to look at it more metaphorically. And yet, there's less comfort in that. We like the comfort that literalism brings.
You have to start out by taking it literally, but then within the context of God speaks, there are what appear to be contradictions and unsolvable conundrums. And as I read the conclusion there, that it is only to appease the intellectual convulsions of the mind of man. So we all want to figure out, just like a Rubik's Cube of like, well, if I do this, and can I do it in 23 moves, and what do I do here now?
There's a specific answer to that in the Quran. It is Allah who has revealed to you the Quran. Some of its verses are precise in meaning. They are the foundation of the book, and others are ambiguous. Those whose hearts are infected with disbelief follow the ambiguous part so as to create dissension by seeking to explain it. But no one knows its meaning except Allah. Those who are well grounded in knowledge say, we believe in it. It is all from our Lord.
During the time of Jesus and Muhammad, we felt the sun died each night and rose again each morning. But now we know that the sun is a star, turning in its great night. And the only thing we know about it is based on which direction we're looking. In fact, every man, every woman is a star. And we don't have to get involved in the drama of disappearance and reappearance, because that's just a matter of who's looking at us.
Why are there so many different religions? Are they all right? Are they paths to the same thing?
I believe that there are only two people in the world, or two types of people. There are those that believe and those that don't. And it doesn't matter what you believe in, as far as I'm concerned as a Druid. If you believe in it, you're a believer.
I am myself greatly puzzled by the obliviousness of many religious people today to the fact of this diversity, religious diversity. It seems to me it takes very little imagination to realize that if one were born at a different place and different time, that one would grow up in an entirely different religious tradition and perhaps would embrace it as fervently as one embraces the tradition into which one happened to be born.
People who grew up in the Far East are unlikely to have dreams of the Virgin Mary, but are quite likely to have dreams of the religious tradition in which they've grown up.
What you believe has got to do with where you were born. So what kind of truth is that?
There are so many different religions because there are so many different people that have different needs from their different religions in different time periods, in different places throughout the world.
It doesn't matter what name you give your gods, your goddesses, or your belief structure. You either believe or you don't. And if you believe, then I'm willing to listen to you as a Druid priest.
Nature seems to like rich variety, and you know, I think that's a good thing.
God loves diversity, and that's why He has made so many religions. If God didn't like people following Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, or Islam, or Christianity, He would have planned the other way around. You see?
There'd be just one religion.
Yeah, there would have been just one religion. So that's forcefully trying to convert people or brainwashing them, telling them only when you follow my way of life you will reach heaven, and all will, I would say, will go against the wishes of the spirit, because spirit loves diversity.
The best evidence there is that there is no God is the multiplicity of religions and gods. In the last 10,000 years, there's been at least 10,000 gods and 100,000 religions.
Bashar has explained the idea of what appears to be conflict or contradiction between different ideas or philosophies by saying that part of the problem comes from the fact that the way humans are taught to look at things is in exclusive ways. We are taught that it's either got to be this or that. The universe is holographic. Bashar is saying it's this and that.
And that a thoughtful person has to take that diversity into account some way or another. And it really ought to, I think, qualify anyone's embracing of a particular tradition. You have to somehow account for the fact that there are other traditions with adherents who are absolutely as convinced as you may be about that tradition.
Hinduism welcomes the teaching of all the prophets in the world. It doesn't exclude anybody. It doesn't say that if you go to a church or a mosque, you cease to be a Hindu. It says, let knowledge come to you from every side.
Druids are famed for their tolerance of other belief structures. I mean, Druids were famed for inviting the Christians into these isles, etc., because Druidry itself is a philosophical standpoint rather than a dogmatic religion.
If you can convince me you have a better religion, a better philosophy, a more reasonable one to govern mankind than the one taught in the Bible, I'll renounce Christianity and follow your religion. Take the gods of Mount Olympus. They're generally individuals of bad character. They lie, they rape, they're envious, they're jealous. I would worship you before I'd worship Zeus.
If you were to ask me, how does someone decide? Well, I don't have to decide because God gave me something called the Torah. God showed up and gave mankind the Torah. And that contains within it a guide for all of human behavior.
We clearly don't have the big picture of what the whole universe and the whole world is like. And therefore, it becomes very difficult to know whether or not our big views of what the world is really make sense. And frankly, it's often been the great people of history who have somehow gotten that little added glimpse, the Einsteins of the world, the Isaac Newtons of the world, and so forth, who have said, gee, I can sort of see the world in a different way than I did before, the mystics of the world. And they say, but the world is not exactly in the limited way in which we think about it, but it's this other whole thing.
All of us have some inkling of the truth of God, and that none of us, I suspect, have the whole picture.
Look, as long as you need a religion, whatever form of religion you need, use it. Go for it. Study it. Become part of it. Absolutely experience it for all that it has. Once you've done that, you'll grow beyond the box of that religion.
There's a saying in Judaism that a little bit of light disperses a tremendous amount of darkness. So, the Jewish way is education, positive influence to the extent that we can. I think the Jews have had a positive influence on most of the societies that they've found themselves in. Have we always done things that are good? No, we're people like anybody else. But the Jewish ideal is to spread light, and that light, a little bit of light, one match in the middle of a dark Madison Square Garden lights the whole place up so that every single person could see that match. One little match, it would pitch black. One match, everybody can see. That's our job: is to transform darkness into light, is to reveal godliness to the extent we can. Idol worship is completely antithetical to that idea. Christianity and Islam are not completely antithetical to that idea, although there are obviously aspects of Christianity and Islam that Judaism disagrees with completely and totally.
The only way of life, the only religion accepted in the sight of Allah is Islam.
See, all the religions of the world, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, they're all wrong. Christianity is the right way, the true way. I know
How
this.
do you know that? I don't know.
Let's suppose that some other religion is true, like Buddhism or Hinduism. If one of these religions is true, then Christianity must be false, because it's a basic fact of logic that truth cannot contradict itself. So they can't all be right.
Jesus being the Son of God doesn't reconcile with the way I believe God exists and cannot be reconciled. So there's no way for both Judaism and Christianity to be correct. I will respect people who believe in Christianity, but I cannot reconcile it with my belief in Judaism.
Everyone within a religion thinks their religion is right, and I don't think anyone outside of that religion can make the case to show how they're wrong.
Gandhi, one of his most famous quotes, if I may paraphrase, was, "I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Muslim," and so on. That's ridiculous. You can't be all of those at once.
If there is only one right religion, then what is God doing to, how does God feel about all the other people praying in the wrong buildings?
When we look at Christianity, Christianity includes a wide, diverse group of people, and not every Christian is going to see God or be saved. It really has to do with the relationship of Jesus Christ. That's who it is, and that He transcends all those religious boundaries, including Christianity.
As a Christian, I have to say that I believe there's a uniqueness about the Christian faith. And so I would hold to that. Nevertheless, that doesn't prevent me from being understanding toward other people's faith perspectives and understanding that other people have things to teach me from their belief system that I may be blind to because of the glasses that I look through.
Yes, the major world religions, do have an awful lot in common. That they believe in a superior being, that they believe in the origin of all creation, that they guide and they lead their members to good living. And in that sense, I think we can say yes, that they all have elements of the truth.
Whatever we do good, we know that that will bring a good result. And whatever we do bad, that will bring a bad result. So in this way, all religions are very same.
But over the years, humans are the ones who changed it, saying our way is better than your way.
I personally don't believe any religion is right. I don't believe religion in itself is right. I believe that the Bible is right, and I believe that anything that promotes and professes that the Bible is the infallible and perfect Word of God is right.
The word Christianity does not exist in the Bible. So Jesus Christ didn't preach Christianity. He preached, he said in the Gospel of John, chapter number 5, verse number 30, "Not my will, but the will of my Father."
I think there's only one God for all of us, but we do take different ways of showing our love for God or giving worship.
Can all religions be right? My thought would be, can any of them be right?
I don't think any of them are right. I think all of them are wrong. I think I'm probably wrong about a lot of my ideas about the universe. And the beauty of looking at the universe in a rational and scientific way is you can say, hey, I'm wrong sometimes.
If you're willing to say, I have this feeling of something and it may not be true. I don't know if it's true. I don't even really have a way of finding out if it's true. I feel this way. It makes me happy. It makes me help other people and be kind and be a better person. But I have no idea if it's right. That is fine. That's great.
Well, the Baha'i faith believes in the unity of God, the unity of mankind, the unity of all religions.
You are right, I am right, she's right, everybody's right. This is the way of expressing the truth.
All beliefs are valid. I think if there was only one way to do something, there would only be one person. There's billions of people on Earth, and I'm sure billions more in the cosmos. They're different perspectives, they're different ways of having a relationship with the infinite.
The bedrock of Baha'i belief is that religious truth is relative and not absolute.
どうぞそして仏教の素晴らしさはいろんな宗教を拒みません。ですからクリスチャンでも座禅に来ます。人種人々すべて問いません。困ったことがあった時、苦しいと思った時、仏教の門をどうぞ皆さん気軽に。
じゃあぜひブッダガヤの方に足を運ばれた時には日本人の方に足を運んでください。
We, as the drop, are always one with the ocean. That is what I believe is the heart of every religion.
The odd thing about religion is we all believe in the same God. There can only have been one creator of the universe. We're just kind of disagreeing about the interpretation of what that means to us.
Bob has said no one religion has any individual claim on God.
There are so many रास्ते बहुत हैं यहाँ आना है आपको इलाहाबाद में आने के लिए बहुत रास्ते हैं परंतु इलाहाबाद एक है ईश्वर one.
I think there's many ways to approach God, and God welcomes everyone, no matter what path they take to get to Him.
The Baha'i faith actually fulfills the prophecies of all faiths, that Baha'u'llah was the 10th avatar of the Hindu faith, that he was the Buddha of universal fellowship from a Buddhist perspective, that he was actually the Messiah from a Jewish perspective, he was the Lord of hosts from a Christian perspective, and from a Shiite Muslim perspective, he was the 12th Imam. He's the expected return of Muhammad. And he's the return of all of those in a single form, with a single faith.
I've heard people claim that all religions are paths to the same thing, and I think it's utter bunk. Because different religions have different agendas, and they're usually socio-political, and they're not leading to one big group hug in some kind of shining hereafter that doesn't exist. People say that because they want to be ecumenical and pretend to all get along. But that's always a pretense, because everybody always wants to forward their own beliefs and their own benefits, regardless of what they're claiming about some kind of supernatural nonsense.
You know, I used to think all religions worship the same God, they just all do it in different ways. There's a God, we just all worship God in different ways. Now I would rephrase that. I would say we are all stunned by this awareness of our existence and death, and we all solve the problem of that awareness in different ways. Some people with religion, some people with science.
If you see courage, you see courage, and it doesn't have religion. If you see love, you see love, and that doesn't necessarily have a religion. When you see somebody saving a life of another, they're not asking, you know, what religion are you? They're just reaching out in a hand of hope.
All religions have some kernel of enlightenment, otherwise people wouldn't see them as helpful to their lives.
Well, they're all right in the sense that they may help you to live a little easier on this planet. They're all right in the sense that they have something to say to get up in the morning. You pick any religion, they can make it be easier to smile while you're eating your Cheerios in the morning. So to that degree they are. But there's a problem with the word. Are they right? That's man's word, that's not God. Right and wrong, all these sorts of things are man's attempt to make sense of things. I think God's bigger than right or wrong.
Should religious ideas be challenged?
Religious ideas should certainly be challenged, just like any other ideas should be challenged. Any idea that's worth its salt should be capable of resisting challenge. The problem with religious ideas is that many people think they're somehow immune to challenge.
Richard Dawkins' fervor, evangelistic fervor, signals to me not a desire to persuade, but to bully people into thinking that what they're saying is entirely without value or respect. Whereas I think both Alan and I are trying to say that the religious tradition that we come from is very attentive to other people's opinions, even when we disagree. It gives value. It doesn't simply say, I acknowledge that you have an opinion, but I also respect that you have an opinion.
My dad just got remarried, and my stepmom is religious. She's a Christian. And I get in trouble a lot for questioning her beliefs, and she gets mad. Well, she doesn't get mad. She's very nice, but my dad gets mad at me for making her upset. And so I think that although all ideas should be questioned, you need to respect the ideas of people even when you know they're wrong.
It's much easier to maintain a belief system than it is to change it. Because to change it means we're not only changing the way we see things, but in some way we're also changing ourselves.
It's much easier to live a life without God. Most people think it's easier to live a life with God. It's not true. It's much easier to live a life without God because I decide what's right, what's wrong. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily happier or not happier, but I decide what's right and wrong. It's all up to me, and I deal within the context of my own limited reality.
And, you know, the thing about religious beliefs is that the moment they are challenged, they crumble. I mean, they just don't stand up to any kind of logical, thoughtful, honest scrutiny. They just don't stand up. You hold them because you want to hold them.
As Bertrand Russell said, the fact that a whole lot of people believe in something does not necessarily mean it's true.
Chances are the person that's coming at you with the idea, somebody else planted that idea in his head. He didn't even think of it himself.
Should religious ideas be challenged?
Since 9/11, I have very much changed my view. I now think that it is not right to sit in silence while myth-inspired ghost stories are driving public policy.
Do you think it changes anybody's mind? If someone who's religious, can they be made non-religious through logic?
If you look historically, I think it's beyond argument that there are many fewer people who are religious now than there were 400 years ago. So it is possible to lessen the hold of religion on people's minds. Whether you can make any individual person give up religion, and whether a person who has deeply held religious beliefs into adulthood would actually benefit from giving up religion is another question.
In my whole life, I have argued about religion, about God with so many people. But never in my life I have been able to make one religious person an atheist. And I don't think I'll ever be able to do it. Because once you are religious, it's like cancer. It can't be cured. It's a 3rd-degree cancer. So you take a child and you crush the kneecap of the child. And then he grows up. He'll limp. He'll limp all his life. Same way, at a very impressionable age, they destroy a part of the brain by teaching him all these things. And then he lives with that destroyed, that crushed part of the brain for the rest of his life.
I always thought that I had a responsibility to challenge people's beliefs. The whole Socratic concept that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Sometimes you feel like you should just leave people alone as best you can, but it's sort of the other way around. It seems that, at least in the United States, there's a lot of effort to impose religious ideas, particular religious ideas, on everybody, even when they are in contradiction to the evidence. So there's a whole discussion about the young earth and intelligent design and all this stuff.
See, I would even say science should be challenged. Secular humanism should be challenged. Atheism should be challenged. No sacred cows, including my own.
I think not only religious values should be challenged, but I think our own personal values should be challenged. I think we need to continue to challenge everything that we look at. Not necessarily from a hostile perspective, but from a perspective of, is this what makes me happy? Is this what I'm passionate about? Is this what I enjoy doing?
We should challenge ourselves. We should challenge our concepts. We should challenge what we believe. We should challenge what other people say to us. We should challenge everything. That doesn't mean that we become mean and intolerable. It means that we keep a little more than just an open mind.
It should be a regular purpose in all of our existences to not accept anything as dogma, but to question all things.
Even ideas we think are absolutely right should be challenged just in case we're wrong.
If you don't challenge what you believe in, how can you believe in it?
You got to question everything in the Bible. You got to question everything in everyday life. It's pretty much, ignorance may be bliss, but there's consequences without it.
The acquisition of knowledge make you challenge wisdom. Because if it's not the truth, it can't stand. But if you speak the truth, it's like a rooted palm tree in the middle of a hurricane.
I have a saying, I don't think you commit intellectual suicide when you become a Christian.
In fact, the Bible tells us that we are to be available in season and out of season to have an answer for those that really ask of us. We need to know why we believe certain things.
Almost every major Jewish idea begins with a question, and a serious question.
God likes an honest question. So the bottom line is the attitude of the person. If they're sincerely seeking truth, then God will show them the truth. But if they just have an attitude, like I had when I was a college student, I really was willing to believe anything that justified my selfish lifestyle.
It's unreasonable for someone to be dealing with a Talmudic legal discussion and all of a sudden ask the question, does God exist? Well, That's the basic underpinning of the whole discussion, and it's not a good question.
Moses argued with God all of the time, but he still followed what God wanted. But the fact that he has specified that the menorah should have these many branches and it should have this bells and this and that, we can ask why, but just do it anyway.
Because we are expected to question our faith in order to realize that it's true, we have to be provided with at least logical arguments against it, or what seems to be logical. And if God wants to plant bones around that are old, that our chemical tests prove to be older than what we believe the world is, it's a test for us that God has given us.
If what I've thought my whole life turned out to be wrong, I'd want to know so that I could grow.
It brings a person closer to their belief to have people challenge you.
Personally, I think we should try to challenge our beliefs. I think that helps us to be a better believer. I think it helps us to strengthen our beliefs ultimately.
When religious ideals are challenged, it gives the one who's challenging an opportunity to receive information. It gives the one who's being challenged an opportunity to reaffirm their faith.
It's because we are doubtful that we are able to make progress. This is perhaps something that's not apparent in the way science works. Every new generation of scientists is charged with checking the entire scientific canon that was created before it came onto the stage.
In order for a religion to be established, we have in our history, every religion that's been established has challenged its predecessors. So I would say religious ideas have to be able to be challenged.
If you don't challenge, you're stuck in the past. You're stuck where those with power have put you.
Krishnamurti was raised at the heart of a almost fundamentalist philosophical and religious group. He saw what philosophy and religious practice does to the minds of people. And he felt that unless one addressed this question of a religious authority, psychological authority, at its very core in each person, that there was no hope for pursuing the greater issues of life and living. Much of his teaching focuses on this challenging of our dependence on authority.
The people who want to keep control, they will tell you what to think, what to believe, and how to behave, and all of a sudden, we're in somebody else's story instead of being center stage in the story of the journey of our soul.
Oftentimes, when you look back and see where the rules came from, if you can go back to the origins, you'll realize that the reasons aren't consistent with your own set of ethics.
The scripture uses the word muse. Muse means to think. And the reason I mention that is if you put a before a word like atheist, a theist is one who believes in God, and atheist is doesn't. So amuse would be doesn't think. We have amusement parks, you know, and that sort of thing. So I don't think we're supposed to be amused with religion. I think we're supposed to think about it.
Don't take anybody's word for it. Let it be your own decision.
Nothing should be accepted on blind faith, because that leads to zealotry.
Without skepticism, then what you have is blind obedience and blind faith.
Skepticism is good because skepticism forces us to think, forces us to reason, forces us to search.
Many people think they're skeptical, but they're actually cynical. Cynicism is when you're half dead, because you're not willing to learn, you don't have any enthusiasm.
It's okay to be skeptical about love. I think most people are after their first bad experience. But if the skepticism turns to cynicism, then you've just slammed the door. And so I'd say with religion too, I think it is very important. I say this in all my classes. It is very important to question what you believe. That doesn't mean shutting the door and not believing in it anymore.
Skepticism and doubt, those are food for faith. Again, show me anybody that knows for sure, and they scare the heck out of me.
I hate to say this, but I think it's sometimes true that the church is not always a place where people can be honest. And I think that's true in other religions as well. There's an annual gathering called Greenbelt, which is sort of 20,000 people camping out and in a Christian arts festival every year at the end of August. And I went to a couple of seminars on what were referred to as faith without church. And there were a number of people who used to be members of churches who stood up to say why they no longer were members of churches, even though they still believed in God. And they said, church is not a place where I can be honest. If I'm honest, people try and correct me rather than listen to me and discuss with me. And I think sadly that's sometimes the case. And I would want us to be in a society and in a church where we can have open, honest, genuine inquiry, and where we can say the things that we sometimes are afraid to say, and where nobody is going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to pray for our reconversion or boot us out of church because we've not quite sort of signed up to the correct doctrinal statement.
It's important to understand that Alan's a little younger than me, but we both come out of a culture certainly in the 70s, and me in the 60s, where it was perfectly okay to express a whole range of opinions within the Christian tradition. But now, in the 1990s and early 2000s, I think for political and social reasons, we've moved to a society which, certainly in religious terms, wants to police people's belief, to control people's belief. And along with that goes the sense that you either believe something correctly or you don't.
Why do people get so angry when you challenge their beliefs?
Well, their beliefs are very important to them.
Perhaps through childhood indoctrination, people identify with their religion in a very personal way.
It's like calling your mother a bad name. If the religion that she taught you and that she inculcated you with turns out to be not true.
These beliefs underpin their most important assumptions. They will live after death. There is a reason to exist. Their good actions will be rewarded. And if you challenge that, they get very upset because it means that perhaps they haven't lived their life the way they would if they knew those things were wrong.
I think that the anger from people whose beliefs are challenged comes from a fear that's rooted in the back of their head that they might be wrong, and this comfort structure that they've pieced together might fall out from underneath them, and they're left in the middle of nowhere with no answers, which is frightening. So it's much easier to get angry.
It's sort of like when you knock somebody's pyramid down or their chapel down, or when you fly a plane. I mean, you think about it. The reason they attacked the Twin Towers is because that's our new chapel. We build this giant church to money, and they attacked it.
That anger is a form of idol worship, which is an amazing state. That's a rather harsh statement. Wait a minute, we all get angry. What, I worship idols? Judaism is based on the whole notion of the end of idol worship. Abraham was the first one to smash the idols, and yet here I am. I consider myself an observant Jew, and I'm an idol worshiper if I get angry? Yes, because what happens when I get angry? All of a sudden, I am saying that my will is that which defines reality and what should be. And when my will doesn't define reality, I get frustrated and angry. Well, that's positing myself as the arbiter of all reality. That's idol worship. I'm not. God is.
So essentially, people get angry because they attach their freedom of movement and communication to particular means, a particular gesture. And they can't realize that as far as who they are appearing as and how the person that confronts them as the opposite point of view is their liberator.
When you ask that question to someone and they get angry, you're knocking down what keeps them away from God. I would say that when you get them angry, whether they like it or not, you're getting them closer to God. You're forcing them to face the moment and to ask themselves some painful questions. God gives them the gift of anger, but they don't make use of it usually. Usually they try to hurt you. They try to shut you up. But I think there's a real gift, a divine gift in those moments. And unfortunately, most of us, myself included, get really upset and unable to make use of it.
I think the reason I get angry when people challenge what I think my beliefs are because I'm not so certain of my beliefs. So if people challenge me It makes me insecure that I'm wrong.
We get angriest when we're questioned about beliefs that deep down we know aren't true or suspect might not be right. So if you challenge my belief that the table is sitting here, it doesn't make me angry at all, because I feel like there's really good proof it's sitting there, and I could probably get a number of other people in the room and they'd all agree. Everything you and I know suggests I'm right and you're wrong. On the other hand, if I had a belief that somewhere down deep I knew was pretty darn shaky, I knew I believed it, but I also knew there was not a shred of evidence in the history of the universe for my belief, and that a lot of people believed it and none of them could offer a shred of evidence, I think I'd be a little worried every time you challenged it.
The truest and most deepest spiritual beings are willing to poke themselves, willing to poke at their own philosophies, their own religion. They're willing to take everything that they know and shred it, throw it away, give it up, moment to moment. That's how you can tell a real realizer.
I don't get angry when people challenge my religious beliefs. People don't really do that a lot, I guess, because I'm a kid and they don't really think I have religious beliefs yet. But I know I've talked to some of my classmates at school and they don't get anywhere near as angry as the adults. In fact, they listen.
It is difficult to argue against the truth.
The people that I've met and led from belief to atheism, usually it takes years and it's stages. They go from conservative Christian to liberal Christian, so that's a safe jump from one rock to another. And then they go from liberal Christian to deist, so that's sort of a safe jump. And then they go from deist to agnostic, so they're not really sure, but probably not. And then they go, then it's easy jump from there to atheism.
There's an alternative, which is much easier, that the other person must be wrong. And therefore, you don't have to change or shake up any of your beliefs at all. You just say, you know what, that other person's wrong. If we know that this person is now wrong, why do they continue to tell me that my beliefs are wrong? Well, that must be a bad person. Why would they do something like that? Why would they purposely try to deceive me? They must be bad. They must be evil. And if they are evil, they have no reason for being here. And there's no reason for me to allow them to continue to be here. They're immoral. And I'm going to dislike them, and if they're completely immoral, then really they have no right to be on the earth. So let's just get rid of them altogether. And I think that is a big driver for, human beings have a fundamental insecurity because we never really know what's out there.
Can a person take what they like about a religion or religions or a religious text and make their own version that works for them and ignore the rest?
Well, I think there's danger in doing that.
About a religion? Certainly. About God's will? No.
I think that's the only reason that some people can still be religious.
I mean, that's what the conservative and the reform movements have done. And while I respect their movements in that they've kept people in their connection to Judaism, that they've given them some form of Judaism to hold on to, as an Orthodox Jew, I still don't consider them to be a legitimate form of Judaism.
You can believe what you want. If you want to believe giant ants rule Pluto, go ahead.
But whether or not it's truth is debatable. I don't believe that it's debatable at all. I mean, you can put a bucket over your head and call yourself, the head founder of the Buckethead religion, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have truth in it.
He said, don't add and don't subtract. Just what the Bible says, do it. It makes no difference whether we understand it or no.
No one really can claim ownership of what the pure Christianity is, or what the pure Judaism is. It's constantly in a state of flux and a state of change.
People pick and choose all the time what they want to believe in the Bible, what they want to follow. Well, then they're being God's editor. They must know more than God, because God wrote the Bible. You should kind of have to follow all of it. There's nothing in the Bible that says this is important, this you can ignore. So it's all important.
I like to take the pieces that work for me and challenge and question the pieces that I don't find ring true in my heart, and then really ask and search, and not search outside, but really soul search.
Can a person take what they like about a religion and follow just that part and ignore the rest?
The question is not can they, it's how do we stop people from doing that? That, I think, is the normal situation, don't you think? That people take only what they want out of a religion. And the idea is to get them to see the wider point of view.
That would be like taking your favorite bits from the multiplication table. I like 5 times 5 is 25. That's cool. When you get up in those 6 and 7s, though, I find them uncomfortable. Let's ditch them.
The commandments are there, and it's not a thing where we just try to get 7 out of 10, and the other 3 we can say, well, that's still a C. We did pretty good.
And I really loved pork.
Oh my goodness. Ham, bacon, pork chops, sausage. Holy cow. I know you've never had it, but my goodness, this is a magical animal, all right, with many, many flavors, okay? Tastes wonderful. Now, if I follow what I want, might still be eating pork, but if I follow the Bible and the Quran and the Veds, it says pork is very bad for you.
Some things I have to give up on. And I'm not willing to, because I believe, I'm not willing to compromise on these things.
If you fall in love with God, you love what he says. And so you want to do it whether or not you like it or not. So it's like that. It's like you're stupid. Like when you're a little boy falling in love with a little girl, you know, you can't think straight and you just do whatever she says.
Just like when you go to buy a camera like this, you get a manual how to press the button and operate, right? So our human life also have a manual. That is the scriptures, like Bible, Quran, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. So any religious people who wants to be close to God and live a saintly life, they have to follow the instruction which is given by the God itself, not the instruction made by you.
Go ahead and read scripture, read something spiritual. Flip the page and start reading. The moment you touch into the place where the scripture is arising from, the moment you feel this opening, the root of whoever wrote that scripture a while back is coming from, and you start to feel that being lived within you, put the book down. Don't worry about finishing it, because it's brought you to the doorway. And then the rest of the doorway, the hallway, is up to you.
Certainly a person can do that, and I think that it's their right to be selective. And, you know, I don't think that anything is really a package deal these days.
Even the ones who say the entire Bible is literally the Word of God, they're still picking out the bits they like, and the bits they don't like. They all do. And when you call them on it, they'll be livid, they'll be furious, because they believe the whole Bible literally, and then they'll always have an elaborate explanation why the part that they don't believe, they actually do believe, because it doesn't mean what it says. But, you know, everybody does that because we adapt religion. Whether God adapts it or not, we adapt it to fit the world we live in. It's a natural human tendency. It's the reason why God needs to continue talking to us, because we manage to always explain why what he really meant is that we get to do what we want.
We all pick and choose.
Doesn't that put us all on a different page then? Are we following different
Well,
religions?
if you think about your picture of Jesus, for example, if every verse about Jesus was true, then it would be very difficult to construct the Jesus that most of us have inside our heads. That picture of Jesus that we have inside our heads, for example, as someone who was always nice to people, who loved everyone, is deliberately contradicted, directly contradicted by those sayings about hate, you know, the Pharisees and lots of other things. So inevitably we have to pick and choose.
To achieve a balance of reading systematically rather than just pulling out your favourite bits every week, I think is really important if we are to get to grips with the heart of the faith and not just create a faith in our own likeness.
That's what the Bible that I've read and the Quran said. Hold fast to that which you understand. Follow that. It still makes you a better person. And that which you don't understand, you know, the Bible says, or the Quran said, be patient. You're coming to the understand, then travel the land. See, and then everywhere you go, you'll see people practicing maybe the principles that you don't understand, but in your travel, you'll grow to an understanding if you desire. So yes, people do it all the time.
仏教は8万4千の訪問って言って、8万4千種類の自分の勉強したい扉があるっていうんです。ゲートがある。それを一人一人に合った自分に合ったものを選んでいくって言います。ですから座禅がいいという人は座禅の門を開くでしょう。浄土宗ね、南妙法蓮華経と唱えるのが、自分に合うっていう人がそれを選ぶでしょう。
It's a matter of taste and appetite that we find what it is that suits us, and we take so much just from the group we belong to. You know, we have so many unquestioned assumptions about the world. I was brought up to believe that I should love everybody, because when I was 4 years old, I was told Jesus said I should love everybody. It took me until I was in my 30s to actually say, is that true? And it was a shock to say, am I allowed to question that? Am I allowed to say, There are some people who are unlovely, and there are some people, and I refine my belief to say, well, I shouldn't harm people. That's as good as I can get.
It's inarguably true that people do pick and choose which of their religious beliefs they're going to follow. I mean, to take one example, the Catholic Church used to practice capital punishment and used to own slaves. And nowadays we'd consider both activities abhorrent. So based on the same book, the same religious principles, they've changed the rules.
This is, of course, why the Catholic Church tried to justify its superiority in its authority, in order that there not be individual interpretations of things. And of course, Luther is the one who objected to that, saying you should follow your conscience. But I mean, people's consciences vary so seriously that in a certain sense, the Catholic Church had a point in establishing Christian doctrines.
If you read the Bible, it's mentioned in the 1 Corinthians, chapter number 5, verse number 7. It says that if a woman who does not cover her head, she dishonors the head if she prays. Her head should be shaved off. Bible is more strict even than the Quran, actually. Theoretically, if you check, Bible is more strict than the Quran.
But people don't follow it.
Don't follow it. So then I go to the Hindu scriptures. Your scriptures say that the woman's head should be covered, you should lower your gaze. They are shocked.
You know, the strictness of religion, you know, the idea of being burned at the stake has become unpopular. And so people are thinking more widely. What we're particularly seeing is this kind of new age crossing between perennialism, sort of saying, well, I'm going to have a bit of this and a bit of that. And at the other end, we're also seeing the re-emergence of very strict fundamentalist credos.
All these people who are suicide bombers are thinking that they're doing it for the sake of religion, and they're wrong. And soon enough, they'll, movements like this run out of steam because you can't fool everybody all the time.
That people who are dogmatic atheists or dogmatic believers will switch to the opposite. That they will go from one extreme to the other. And the best place to be is probably somewhere in the middle where you are less dogmatic, less fanatic.
My mom, she'll say, I enjoy believing in God. I like being part of the Catholic Church. I take what I like and I ignore the rest. And I think that's the only way any sane person can be in a religion. If you really took it seriously, all of it, like I did, you wouldn't be part of it or you would be insane.
If I don't want to think about a God who can sanction rape and genocide, and I toss it out, I may be tossing out a very important truth. Religion and your spirituality, it's gotta hurt. It's like going to the gym. It's gotta stress and strain. You gotta really be able to struggle with it. I'm really concerned with those people who just pick and choose, because they're not really having to do the hard work. They're not really having to struggle with things.
Can we ignore some of the commandments?
Well, here's the thing. We do. I mean, it's actually ridiculous that they're even there. I mean, adultery and stealing and murder, and I mean, they're pretty simple, aren't they? Thou shalt not kill. It's not even like thou shalt not kill on a windy day in the rain with a knife. I mean, it's just that simple. Thou shalt not kill, yet we've ignored it since man has walked the planet. So the commandments are almost like a joke.
We cannot ignore any of the commandments.
Do you?
Of course.
How many commandments are actual law?
All of God's commandments are summed up into one commandment.
Actually, I just do what Jesus did, and he broke them down to two. Love God with everything you have.
And love your neighbor. You're not going to murder someone you love. You're not going to steal from someone you love. You're not going to cheat someone you love, whether it be God or man.
There are 613 commandments, that we know. Nowhere in the Torah does it say this is commandment 1, this is commandment 2, this is commandment 3. There are disagreements as to what constitutes a commandment or not. One of the most famous disagreements, you'll be amazed, is the belief in God a commandment in the Torah or not?
If you look at some of the different commandments that we were given, they just don't make sense at all. If you suspect your wife of being adulterous, warn her in front of 2 witnesses that she can't go on doing this. If you still suspect her afterwards, take her to the temple. The priest will take some water, write a couple of verses down on it, put that into the water so the ink mixes in with it. Take a handful of dirt, put it in the water, give it to her to drink, and if she was adulterous, she'll explode. Now, How much this will actually prevent adulterous behavior, I mean, the average logical person will just laugh.
Well, there are commandments in the Bible that we can ignore if taken in context. For example, God told Noah to build an ark. That commandment's not for us. And he told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, but that commandment's not for us.
Ink mixed with water and dirt will not make a person explode. But this is one of the commandments that God gave us, and therefore I believe that in the times of the temple, yes, this did actually happen. I don't know how often it was done, but there's no way that man could have come up with something like that and convinced other people that this made perfect sense, unless it was a people that had seen miracles happen around them.
Ja sam oprala veš jedan put u nedelju i mi je grom ubila svinju sa 12 prasića. I više ne. Više ne.
So many of the commandments are temple-centered or Israel-centered and depend on either there being a temple or all of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel. So many of the commandments are not applicable today.
Probably abstaining from pork would not be a bad idea. I eat a lot of bacon and sausage, so I'm not the right guy to ask about that. I recuse myself.
How do people reconcile the fact that the Bible portrays things in a positive light that are no longer acceptable today?
The Bible was true yesterday, but it also true today.
A lot of people, including my parents actually, don't really want there to be another temple that animals will be sacrificing it. So if you ask most religious people, yes, we're waiting for the next temple to be built. My father says, I'm not sure I really want it, because I don't really know if the Jewish religion should go back there.
Yes, if your holy book tells you that all sorts of things that are obviously wrong are right, you shouldn't reconcile it. You should say, my gosh, this might not be a holy book after all. Maybe if that thing's wrong, what other things are wrong that I don't know about?
When you look at Joshua going into Canaan, there are several injunctions from Jehovah that he will bring up the fighting spirit in the Canaanites so that the Hebrews will feel no guilt in murdering every man, woman and child. So it's absolute genocide, and it's a part of Jewish and Christian scripture.
God told his chosen people to rape and to murder. Now you need to really, you can't just throw that passage away. You've got to ask yourself some serious questions. What sort of God sanctions genocide and rape? And in asking you those sorts of questions, you can grow and be strengthened by having to grapple with that. God in the Bible is not always very nice. In fact, he can be somewhat homicidal.
Because one of the things about religion that I always think about, I'm sure other people do too, is that it's one of the few things that hasn't changed with society. Our dress has changed, the movies, our language, everything about us has changed except religion. It's still this dark friggin' book that like, live like that. You mean like back then, way back then when they heaved people to the lions and they smited people down, which is a word we don't use often enough anymore. Wouldn't that be great to just, look at somebody and go, smite him, and next thing you know, he's dead, and then you can move into his house. But I just think it's time to grow up. Religion should change.
It also says that women aren't supposed to speak in church, so I've had to wrestle with these scriptures.
Well, that's why you have to say that if that's the word of God, then God is obviously flawed. I mean, it's written, the Bible reflects the society of human beings at a certain time.
So you've got to realise that the people who were writing a lot of the holy books were people of their time. And so the stuff they were writing about was right then, doesn't mean it's right now.
You're reading worldviews that were constructed thousands of years ago.
Well, let's just go back to the Old West being settled. A lot of things went on as we, in our manifest destiny, moved west in our country in the 1800s that we just think is atrocious. But the truth is, the times were different. There was nothing but martial law that existed across those deserts.
And I know what you're saying. Wasn't it wrong then? Yes, according to what we read now, it was wrong. But at the same time, it can be wrong and still be permissible. God permitted it.
I have to say to you too, there are many things that are in the Bible that God is not pleased with.
But that's the truth of God's Word. God didn't just take all the good things and put them into His Word. God said, this is the way mankind has been. I mean, it starts off that way with Adam. I mean, God would have rather had Adam not eat of the tree.
He knew our standards today, back then. If it's God, He knew what the future was going to be. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden things are different and God didn't know what He's talking about. Come on.
Often people just leave it at that, never asking the obvious questions like, well, I thought God was the same in the past and the same in the present. Why the difference? Is God changing? Or why is it different from one society to the next? Does God think slavery is okay sometimes? If so, then why not now?
It's all a matter of what you define as your arbiter of truth. Meaning, is polygamy immoral? Well, modern society has defined it that way. Who says they're right? Now, it happens to be that 1,000 years ago, in the Ashkenazi community, in the European Jewish community, so polygamy was outlawed.
Yeah, there's stories of multiple wives in the Bible. Doesn't mean that my husband has to take 4 wives. It means that in the time of Abraham and Jacob, it was a custom.
I don't know anyone who's actually done it, but theoretically, a Yemenite Jew here in Israel could go ahead and marry 2 wives.
There are a few people, some Christians out there, the Reconstructionists, who do read those things closely and who are advocating going back to stoning people.
I think we should have those things today. That's what, where's, no. Because the Bible is a product of its times. It was just like, it's like a newspaper.
I mean, some of the passages we read in the Old Testament can be horrifying by today's standards, you know, like just annihilating one's enemies, you know, rather than trying to reconcile with them and so forth, because there's a moral refinement that goes on.
If you read the Old Testament in sequence rather than the snippets that the skeptics clip out and hold up for you by surprise, you see that it is a sequential thing. You see it leading from the savagery of the world they found themselves in, by degrees up through morality until eye for an eye becomes turn the other cheek.
People look at, say, an eye for an eye and realize and think, what a primitive doctrine. You go, no, but you got to understand, who was God telling this to? He was telling it to people who, if you kill my cow, I'll kill your son. If you kill my son, I'll kill your entire family. And he was saying, no, kill the cow, they lose a cow. Kill the son, they lose a son, or they lose their own life. You know, they kill a person, then that person loses his life. A limitation, a vast improvement on the previous thing, which was, you got me, I'm going to get you 10 times worse. He's saying 1 for 1. And so it's an improvement. It's an incremental step forward.
The Catholic Church is a history of changes. You know, the essentials remain the same.
The Old Testament is to prepare the coming of Jesus Christ, and the New Testament is a continuation of the Old Testament through Jesus Christ, the Son of God.
Well, Christians say that all that stuff about slavery and misogyny and so on is Old Testament, and that Jesus came along to give us a new morality. That's what the Christians say. The Jews say, nonsense, you're just misreading the Old Testament, and they debate these things.
Well, remember that most of the really tough stuff was excised by the church and is now on the index. The Bible is merely a compressed version of what it was.
Do you think that slavery is good?
The slavery that's talked about in the Bible would be more in our history like indentured servitude.
So when the Jews were slaves in Egypt and had to build the pyramids, it was just like a job to them?
I think God's judgment coming upon the Jews and the Egyptians had wicked intentions. Bad things happen to people and good can come out of it.
I think the effect of the Bible was to humanize slavery so that there are laws in the Old Testament about liberating slaves and treating slaves justly, and in the New Testament the idea is that masters should treat their slaves as human beings and respect their human rights.
So do you tell people slavery is bad, so I'm not going to tell you how to treat your slaves? Or do you then tell people how to treat their slaves since they live in a world where slaves are owned and put limits on them?
The Bible at that time, if they had said, you know, slavery's wrong, dude, then everyone would probably not have followed Christianity. And so I think that were I to put myself in a Christian's shoes, like all good ideas are good things, it must be adapted over time. Like the Constitution, you got to make amendments to it, and sometimes you can interpret it wrongly and you have to fix that.
The directions Paul gave to the slaves is directions that we can use ourselves, how to treat those that we work for.
The slave masters had a part of the Bible they would recite, you know, slave obey their master. You know, that was the only part of the Bible that they credited.
In Islam, a person who had been captive or slave, if they're acting in accord with your law, they could even marry into your family. And in fact, that's how peace was established in the Middle East under Prophet Muhammad. He married into warring tribes' families. So then he became a family member. So that's the positive aspect of slavery that people don't understand. The practice of it in the modern context made people despise it. But done right, under God's law, see, that's not slavery. I'm just holding you because right now you're aggressive. And until we find a point of contention that brings peace to you and peace to me, then I'm supposed to release you back. I don't supposed to put you on death row and kill you.
I'm sure even if slavery was practiced, there would be a requirement for how slaves were treated in a humane way, given, you know, place to stay, food to eat.
A lot of these slaves, not all of them, but a lot of them were treated very well. There were very specific laws about slavery, especially in the Quran. If you have slaves, you have to treat them very well or God is not happy.
I think it's wonderful that the Bible contains things like slavery and polygamy and promotes them. And I tend to think that the folks who really believe in that Bible would like to make those things socially acceptable again.
Slavery is a good one, I think, because I've done a lot of work with the homeless, and I've often said if slavery were legal, we probably wouldn't have any homelessness here. That's not very popular at times, but the kind of slavery that the Bible talks about isn't real well studied. People like to accuse it, oh, it supports slavery. But the slavery of the scriptures is that every 7th year the slave was to be let free. And if the slave didn't want to go free, then he had to become a perpetual slave of the person, which they drove in all through the ear of the person to mark that person as what's called a bond slave.
If you look at the slavery, according to the Jewish laws, there are actually a very, very smart way of entering criminals. You don't put them in jail with other inmates where they can learn to be a better criminal. The Jewish law says that if someone stole money and he can't give you the money back, he will work for you. He will work for you with your family. It's actually a rehabilitation.
If you look like me, you came from the shores of Africa. Regardless as to how many centuries we've been in America, this is where we started, on the shores of Africa. And it would be interesting to trace that history back and look at our culture. And not only that, to kind of see what was it we did that God allowed us to go in captivity. What heathen or idol worship that we were doing that God allowed us to come into captivity. And when I say that, you keep in mind every time the children of Israel went into captivity, it's because of their disobedience.
One of my favorite philosophers is Aristotle. And Aristotle is pretty straightforward about the fact that the Athenian economy is built on the institution of slavery. And he has, furthermore, some fairly hateful comments about slaves are sort of naturally inferior, and this is probably a good position for them. But, you know, you don't dismiss Aristotle because of that.
Slavery, all right, you're right, the Torah does say it's permitted, but there are, just because it's permitted doesn't mean we're expected to go do it. We still have to live in a community with the world around us.
Whether you're religious or not, there are some things we just don't understand.
I guess you'd call it supernatural.
Anything which we don't understand is supposedly supernatural. The moment we solve it, it becomes natural. So yes, in that sense, there are a lot of things which are supernatural at the moment, but hopefully in very near future, most of them will cease to be supernatural.
Supernatural refers to certain supernatural entities as causal agents, souls, gods, certain mental forces in the universe. And if those things actually existed, they would be scientifically detectable and scientifically confirmable, scientifically understandable. And had they existed, we would have been able to prove them by now. We would have a sort of a supernaturalistic science, and it would be based on, to give you an example, if demons really existed and made planes crash, we could scientifically study what kinds of demons, how we can stop them, which spells work. We could have a whole scientific system of demon control, essentially, or demon defense and demon identification.
Christianity does give us genuine supernatural spiritual power with God to heal the sick, to prophesy, to have supernatural revelation.
That's not to say that Christian people have to be skeptical of these things, but I think without serious evidence, one has to remain uncertain.
And someone who would go looking for the supernatural might be looking for an epiphany, let's say. An epiphany is where a deity exposes himself.
Your mind is going to create the perception, what you see. That's why they used to see leprechauns and gnomes and all these things.
It is certainly real for the person who has the experience.
I don't believe that there are things that happen in the universe that can't be explained by physical law.
Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction writer, formulated Clarke's third law. He was talking about technology, and he said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If you were to show a mobile cell phone or a television camera or a motor car or a plane to a medieval peasant, or indeed a medieval anything, he would instantly think it was magic. Just an ordinary telephone would seem to be magic. It does the same job as telepathy, and you ask me, do I believe in telepathy? Well, I'm prepared to believe in anything for which there's evidence.
I would find it utterly fascinating, amazing, and it would make me really happy if we could find just one bit of evidence for a ghost or for any of the paranormal phenomena that people like to report, because it would just mean that the universe is that much richer.
I taught a psychology class, and I had a woman come up to me at the end of the class. This is decades ago. And she said, when I started your class, I was a Christian fundamentalist, handing out pamphlets. Me and my husband. It's now 15 weeks later, I'm getting divorced, and I've become an atheist. I said, I don't understand why. I never mentioned the word God at any point. This is a psychology class. She said, yes, but you taught me why people believe ridiculous things.
People are incredibly gullible and eager to believe.
If we don't know why lightning is shooting down from the heavens, well, it can easily be explained because, of course, Zeus is angry with us. And maybe we need to sacrifice a virgin, maybe we need to change the way we're living, but at least we understand it.
Scientists strongly believe that the more outrageous a claim you make, the stronger a burden of proof is upon you. And unfortunately, this seems to get reversed. People will make enormous sweeping claims that would overthrow all of science on the basis of one blurred photograph of something on the horizon.
Why are we superstitious?
When you do false pattern recognition, as our ancestors did, because they didn't have an error-correcting methodology like science to say, okay, there's been a drought, and I know that I slept with so-and-so and I wasn't supposed to, and nobody knows this, but God knows this, and therefore that's why we're having this drought, damn it. And ex-God is really mad at us, and so we have to placate him. So you have to have a kind of guilty frame of mind to begin.
Yes, we are hardwired to think magically. It's built into the learning process. Magical thinking is no different than any other kind of thinking. It's pattern-seeking behavior. So when you connect A to B to C and to D in a linear sequence, you go, okay, that's the causal sequence. That's what we do. And when we're right, it works really well.
Within Druidry, there are many different specialities, and there are many different Druids who will specialize in many different things, including healing, divination, astrology, and most of the things that are thought to be esoteric.
Judaism does have in its folklore possession.
Well, the Bible specifically addresses astrology and psychics, and it condemns that practice.
The book of Deuteronomy outlaws various things such as astrology, consulting the dead, sorcery, witchcraft. All of these things are spoken out against. There is a devil, and he does have supernatural powers.
There's the concept of Gilgal, of reincarnation, that a soul gets passed on until it finally gains enough credit to move on to the world to come.
所以儒家思想和孔子呢，可以说呢，它是一个完全没有巫术，而且呢，也反对这个迷信的一种思想体系。
As soon as you start getting into paradoxical, transcendental stuff, we Mormons just kind of go, that's all hooey.
Is it a good idea to teach children that there's a Santa Claus and then no there isn't?
I know.
There's a tooth fairy, no there isn't?
I felt very uncomfortable lying to Mulan about that. You know, like I wanted her to be part of it.
How I found out.
Yes, yeah, you can say how you found out about the tooth
Okay,
fairy.
this is how I found out about the tooth fairy. I was in my mom's bathroom and I was just looking through her drawers and I found my tooth and I was like, Mom.
She found the tooth.
I forget the rest. Could you tell them?
And then you came to me and
then
said,
I came to me and said,
what is this?
What is this? And then you were like,
It's your tooth? And then you said, is there a tooth?
Is there a tooth fairy?
I said, no. Well, I'm the tooth fairy. That's the answer. And then she went, oh. And then she said, you said to me,
Are you Santa Claus too?
I said, I am.
It's a tough question. Should you be honest from the beginning?
I know, that's the thing. For me, I wanted her to know that I would always answer her honestly. Although I totally acknowledge that kids get a lot of fun and delight out of that. I guess it's just my own particular circumstance. Like, in a way, I feel like I was lied to my whole life. I was lied to by the church. I was lied to. It became okay to lie. And I really am probably reacting too much against that when it comes to things like the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus. But I don't lie very well. I don't like lying.
I have friends who are rather devoted to astrology, and they're always giving me facts, which just aren't facts in my universe at all. And it's not that I think they're not true. It's just I don't have the framework within which these observations make much sense.
Hitler followed his astrology, and he lost the war, probably because of it.
I find things like astrology to be dangerous. The idea that our future's in the control of the position of stars, particularly because astrologists tend to get the stars wrong, right? They've used the Babylonian scale system, they've ignored the Earth's tilt, but anyway.
ज्योतिष ग्रंथ गलत नहीं है, उसको लगाने वाला गलत हो सकता है, पर ज्योतिष की जो भी भविष्यवाणियां हैं, जो भी ज्योतिष का अपना आधार से इसमें विश्वास करते हैं.
There is so much information that you're trying to bind into some sort of narrative. You're always going to have a mini narrative or two, a branch that you're going to have to go off on to be able to make sense of it. I think astrology is like that too.
Islam doesn't believe that you should involve yourself in predicting the future.
We have the ability to connect outside of a time and a place. The Baha'is are told during our dream states, for example, that we are actually seeing things that are taking place. We may be seeing things that are taking place at another time in another place.
Psychics, to the best of my knowledge, are not accurate beyond chance.
You know the kind of tricks where you fish and you've got a large audience and you say, I'm getting somebody with white hair who had pains in their chest and you know, people with white hair die and they very often have pains in their chest when they die, and so you fish and you gradually, by this technique of cold reading, you can come up with quite a good reading which fools people.
Some people do seem to be psychic. They seem to kind of, I don't know, be able to kind of figure out what's going on with somebody. They have some sort of emotional bond with, even though they're not in communication, they're on the other side of the globe. So there's something there, that sort of sixth sense, I guess we call it. But I think we're still trying to figure out what it's all about.
I've seen people who've been extraordinarily insightful and have said things to me in the past that they couldn't possibly have known, but that they have somehow picked up. And you know, you call that psychic, you call it very sensitive, you call it great perception.
Is it a mystic?
A mystic, I think, then is somebody who is very much in touch with God and who would have a very strong sense of God.
But the psychic, I think, is using demonic powers rather than powers from the Holy Spirit. I think God can move upon a true believer, and that he might reveal something to you about another person's life in a supernatural way.
According to the Bible, psychic is nothing but, if you don't mind me saying, but a witch, a modern day witch.
As the writer of Seventh Son, about some of the mystical frontier magic religion things that people had, of course those ideas still survive in America, and you should hear some of the contacts I get from people who are believers in that. And you know, the word wacko comes to mind, and I'm afraid it's an uncharitable thought, but yeah, they're wackos.
Is there any magic in the world?
No. I believe in UFOs. If we're here on this planet, in this solar system, and there are a billion solar systems, there has to be life somewhere else. I'll be the first one if a UFO came down and said, "You want to go for a ride? See ya, sweetheart. House is taken care of, the kids are taken care of. I'm gone for a long ride. If they bring me back, you'll see me. I'm gone."
We heard there was a UFO sighting about 2 weeks ago.
Was there indeed? Yes.
Did you see it? Did you hear about it?
It doesn't matter if I did or didn't, because there is a UFO sighting in all 2-week periods. And so, yes, I'm sure there was. No doubt whatsoever. In fact, I just noticed something out of the corner of my eye, and I'm not quite sure what it was. So by definition, it's an unidentified flying object.
UFOs, you know, if it doesn't tell me in the Bible about them, then I don't have any firm grounds to believe it.
Do I believe there are aliens out there? No, but I'm open to it because Judaism doesn't say one way or the other.
I believe that there are other worlds that are inhabited by the children of God. That's part of Mormon doctrine. That's why I jokingly talk to other science fiction writers who are Mormon, and we say, well, we already have a science fiction religion, so we never have any conflict between our religion and what we write. But it's a well-ordered universe, and they don't mess with us. We're not messing with them. You know, when God talks to us, he's talking to us about ourselves, our world, and you know, we're not going to be bumping into people from other worlds by accident.
Well, Baha'is were actually told 150 years ago that there are planets around other suns and creatures on those planets.
You know, given the size of the universe, I think it's quite likely that there is intelligent life on other planets.
I believe it was Carl Sagan said, the universe is a big place. If we're the only intelligent life in the universe, boy, is that a waste of space.
Meher Baba says there are 18,000 worlds that have life in the universe. I think all the references that I've heard from him, there are only 3 worlds that have human life.
Probably 1 out of every 10 stars you see in the sky has planets around it. And my colleagues have discovered over 200 planets around nearby stars. And in the last 2 years or so, they've discovered planets that are rocky planets, like the Earth. And I think in the next decade or so, we'll discover planets that are Earth-like, planets that perhaps have oxygen atmospheres, water, signs of life. And I think knowing that there were other sentient creatures out there would change the way we think about our place in the universe.
If they have, for example, an atmosphere that's rich in oxygen, as ours is, that absolutely requires life. And in some respects, life that's similar to at least the microbial life on Earth, which is responsible for our oxygen atmosphere.
I'm as certain as I'm certain of anything that this is not the only planet with life. There are so many other planets in our galaxy, many other galaxies, but even in our solar system, there's a good chance, I think, that we're going to find Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter, has life, but if it's life as we know it, it's got there because we've infected it. If it's life as we don't know it, it'll be interesting. It's another version of life.
I greatly doubt that they would come to us in the form of UFOs. And that's just a question of timescale, because what people imagine with UFOs tend to be civilizations that are a little advanced of ours. And I think you have to think about it this way. Humans have been around for only a few million years. The planet's 4.5 billion years old. If there were aliens on another planet, they're likely going to be 1 billion years more advanced than we are, or 1 billion years less advanced. If you look at the planet and ask, what's 1 billion years less advanced than us? That's before the Cambrian explosion. You're looking at very primitive life forms. And you think how far life has come on Earth in the past 1 billion years. Think how far humanity's come in the last 10,000 years in our technical capabilities. Imagine where we'll be 1 billion years from now. And we're not going to be traveling in some spaceship that looks remarkably like whatever high-tech thing the military is testing in Utah.
Actually, I've never thought about that. Because when I was in 5th grade, I saw a UFO myself and wrote President Kennedy about it, wrote the president, and I got a response. To this day, I really believe I saw something that came from some other place. Did that shake my belief in God? Did it change my belief in God? No, it didn't. I didn't put the two together other than recognizing I don't know everything about God. I don't know everything about the universe.
Because there are the religious people that think that God created the universe, not just the world. So if God created the universe and there's aliens in the universe, then I would say that God created those.
On 2 different occasions in the same week, I had 2 broad daylight close-range UFO sightings here over Los Angeles. First time about 150 feet away, second time about 60 feet away, both with witnesses. Equilateral triangular craft, dark in color.
No, I don't go for any of that stuff because the evidence, the evidence just isn't there. And we're the ones who are out there all night looking up into the sky. Do we see UFOs? Do they ever come to observatories? No. It's always the sheriff in Louisiana in the swamp. It's never at the observatory.
Flying saucers from outer space or some other planet. No, I don't believe that. I suppose it could be true. But I don't like to believe something for which there's not solid evidence.
God doesn't have to bring somebody here in a spaceship to tell us these things. He had his son born in this world as the mortal son of mortal mother, and nothing more is needed. If he wants to talk to us, he talks to us. He doesn't have to send somebody from another planet. UFOs, things like that, I just, alien abductions, I just go, sorry, don't believe it, don't think it happened. Whatever memories you have, they were not produced by actual events in the real world.
Today, the UFO cults are generally very religious. They're people looking for saviors, but they find that the explanations of gods and demons and angels and devils is just passé, and that it's far easier to look for emissaries from other worlds who are bringing messages of peace or some way of creating a more evolved human being. But it's the same old story.
Is there some midpoint between religious and not religious? What is spirituality?
I have no idea. Look it up in the dictionary. I may do the same.
It has a basis in the New Testament. It essentially referred to living one's life according to the Spirit of God. But over the centuries, it too underwent a change.
The word spirituality originally comes from the word spirit, which means soul. Of course, it originally meant breath or air, but it means soul. And so people associate spirituality with a belief in a soul and a God and a transcendent reality and so forth.
We're physical beings, we're mental beings, we're spiritual beings. It's like the Trinity, perhaps.
It's more of a personal interpretation.
I think that spiritual is way more a personal word than religious is.
Yeah, and I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what being spiritual.
Everybody is spiritual in some way. I myself feel the same impulse of reverence, the same impulse of awe towards the universe and that which we don't understand. That is what people mean by spirituality when they say, I don't believe in God, but I am spiritual, or something like that. If you press me, I'll say, I don't believe in God, but I'm spiritual. I'm reluctant to say it because I know how easily, indeed eagerly, it's misunderstood by people who want to misunderstand.
Spirituality is all inclusive, whereas religion becomes exclusive.
When you go a little above the religion level, you come to a spirituality.
Some of us desire and need a sense of God in order to kind of sand down the rough edges of our neuroses and our mental defects.
Spirituality is related properly to God through His Word.
If you say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, and it means I don't go to any church, but I still don't steal, I don't lie, you can trust me, I give my word, I keep my word, I'm kind to my children, but I still take the responsibility to discipline them and teach them to be good citizens seriously. In other words, I'm living a moral life. Then great, I don't mind. I can live in the same community with you.
Basically, I think of those people as worshiping a god of their imagination, just living in their own imaginary world.
Spirituality is a much higher reflection of human life than, say, religion. I mean, the worst people in the world tend to be religious, or at least to proclaim religion.
Religion is something that was created by man, a religion. Spirituality is the true belief in Jesus Christ.
Baba has said religion can only bring one to the threshold of the spiritual path at best.
Spirituality is the core and the seed of every religion without the intermediaries, without the ritual that surrounds it.
One, it's usually an attachment to some Eastern philosophy, which are less based in religion and more based in sort of a spiritual notion of a connectedness between all of us, a feeling that somehow we're connected to some higher power, that we ourselves are part of a higher power. But to be spiritual, I think, implies a sense that we somehow transcend the physical universe.
Spirituality is kind of this ethereal term that people use to politely say, I don't believe, but they don't want to come off as a non-believer, so they say, I'm spiritual.
I think what they're trying to do is say, I recognize that the basic dogmas of religion don't stand up to any empirical scrutiny. I'm smart enough to know that if you think these things through, they just can't be true. How can I retain some shred of what I was taught as a child and yet not be responsible for believing all the myths? And I think the word spiritual allows you to do that.
My brother, who is a confirmed atheist, came into the cathedral the first time we moved here, and he said, he thought he'd go and have a look around the cathedral. And he came back an hour or two later and he said, well, bloody hell, all I can say is that were a spiritual experience. And I think for a lot of people, that sense of somehow being open to transcendence, numinous, to somehow a glimpse of otherness that we might call God, is important to them, but often is not linked to what you might call religious practice.
It's the moment you found a religion that you have a level of bureaucracy. You've created a thing. Spiritual is, you're a bit more promiscuous. You're not married to one thing or the other.
It's just a way of saying, I believe in God, but I'm not going to put myself inside some box that says this is how I should believe in God.
What that means to me is that they're transcending the box of a conformity that they came from. They're moving outside of just a structure so that they can find the mystery without a structure.
Religion is like, hey, carry this 800-pound sack up the hill, and if you don't drop it, we'll give you some water. That's religion. Spirituality is like, hey, you don't have to carry anything, but if you feel really heavy inside, like you're carrying a sack, you can let that go and be free and just walk up that hill, and then you can drink as much as you want.
But what they're really saying is, I'm not going to follow anybody's rule set. I'm not going to change my life or bend my desires to fit anybody else's view.
I consider myself a deeply spiritual person. And when I say spiritual, I'm taking back that word.
Well, when you spend more time in your day thinking about what you can do for someone else than for yourself, that's what I think true spirituality would be.
Gandhiji does not mix spirituality with morality. He is talking about spirituality as like inner conscience.
To me, the most spiritual thing in the world
comes with art. Music is a spiritual experience. Looking at the great paintings is spiritual experience. Reading a great poem is a spiritual experience.
When you're on the top of a mountain, it's dark, the telescope is working properly, you know, it's really wonderful, and you have that sense of really understanding that we live in a galaxy. When you see the Milky Way, it's not just some band of light, you know, spilled milk. It is the edge-on view of our own galaxy, and the sense that, you know, we're really part of that whole thing, where the human beings are not apart from the world. We're, you know, piece of the natural world.
For most of my life, I've looked at nature. That's why I was a biologist when I was a kid. I've looked at nature with a sense of wonder. And to me, that's spirituality. That's what it's all about. And that's why I want to say I feel real gratitude just for having a chance to know all this.
If you go out in a morning on a still lake, you'll see a fish jump out of the water. And the fish jumps out of the water and then falls back into the water. We're like that fish. The fish eye is designed to see in water. It's never designed to see in air. So that fish jumps out of the water, flops back in the water, and the other fish say to it, "So what'd you see?" And the fish says, "You know, I got a glimpse of something else. I didn't see it very clearly because it was all kind of blurry, but just for an instant, I saw another reality." And I think that many of us have had experiences where we've had that glimpse and we've seen it through a blurry lens. And once you have that experience, or however often you have that experience, you're convinced that there's something else and you just are incapable of clearly seeing it.